submit questions, and everyone attending live online is invited to add to the discussion with additional questions, and hopefully we'll get through most of them within the session's time frame. There are a couple of definite trends running through the initial questions raised by various people, and we'll attempt to address those as well as expand upon questions raised by the live audience. We have a panel of industry people here, and I'll introduce them. Paul Simionato joined the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator in September 2016. Now in the role of Director of Southern Region Operations, Paul manages on-road compliance and enforcement activities in South Australia, Victoria, the Australian Capital Territory, and Tasmania. Paul has 32 years of legal experience in a combination of areas, including law enforcement with the South Australian Police, and as a prosecutor with the Office of Director of the Public Prosecutions. His previous experience in the legal profession also includes a partnership in a law firm specialising in criminal law, regulatory law, and disciplinary matters. With his extensive experience in the legal profession, Paul is committed to road safety. Shannon Kyle. As a transport solutions specialist with Teletrac Navman, Shannon works with the transport solutions team and is based out of Sydney. He brings over 20 years of transport industry experience in operations and compliance management. Shannon is a Nhvr accredited HVA auditor who has worked with both transport companies and off-road parties to deliver compliance outcomes through various accreditation schemes such as NHVAS, TruckSafe, WA-HVA, and industry codes of practice. Shannon is a passionate advocate of the transport industry and brings his extensive compliance management knowledge to ensure our solutions deliver industry best practice compliance outcomes. Moving on to Bec Coleman. Bec is currently the Chief Operating Officer with the Livestock, Bulk and Rural Carriers Association. The LBRCA represents over 220 transport businesses located across regional and rural New South Wales. Bec commenced her career in the heavy vehicle freight industry in 2014 with the Australian Livestock and Rural Transporters Association, the ALRTA. Prior to her career in the freight industry, Bec has a broad background in both the aviation regulation and workplace training industries in various technical roles. Bec has a particular interest in safety within the road freight transport sector and is an active participant of several industry committees, including the AusHealth Getting Into Gear Mental Health Program Steering Committee, Transport for New South Wales Farmgate Access Steering Committee, and the New South Wales Livestock Loading Scheme Driver Learning and Assessment Steering Committee. Bec is a current member of the Transport Women Australia Limited. Our fourth panellist is Lyndon Watson. Lyndon is the CEO of refrigerated transport and warehousing provider Don Watson Transport and Cold Stores. Growing up within a family-operated livestock and refrigeration transport business, Lyndon uses his interest in mechanical and process design to develop improved efficiency through innovation and staff engagement. With a desire to facilitate positive change in the wider transport and warehousing industry, Lyndon is an active member in many technical committees across multiple industry associations. In 2018, Lyndon was a participant in the Daimler Truck and Bus Future Leaders Forum, undertaking a leadership project that focused on operating a profitable business in a carbon-neutral future. Okay, first question, and I'll direct it to Paul. The Nhvr has promoted the issue of being an intelligence-led regulator when conducting compliance and enforcement activities. Are you able to provide us with some details on this topic and how the regulator performs its duties?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. It's probably one of the most momentous years, I think, we're all through COVID-19, but I want to firstly thank and acknowledge everyone online, industry and supply chain, for their strong safety and productivity performance you've shown during COVID-19. Just when we talk about compliance, I just need to clarify that. So compliance activity should empower those, from my perspective, who are best placed to manage safety to do so, recognise those good operators, whilst at the same time ensuring the same benefits not afforded to those who blatantly flout the law. The goal of the Nhvr is to ensure we focus on innovative regulation to support the large percentage of those operators who are here online who do the right thing, not punitive over-regulation that caters to the small percentage who don't. So when we talk about some of the advances in technology, I remember doing a few presentations to TMC Online probably a few years back, and we spoke about the regulatory compliance mobility solution. it was a pie-in-the-sky stuff back there, and I got really excited over the years how we've developed it and it's finally arrived. It's that technology that our on-road officers use every day as BAU throughout operations across the southern region at the moment, which is ACT, Tassie, Vic and SA. And soon with the transition, hopefully, of New South Wales and Queensland, that'll be rolled out to those transition officers in those states in due course. It's a one-stop case management system for our SCOs. So have a think about it. What's the benefit to industry? And I'll tell you what that is. Quite often we get our interstate truck drivers who are travelling between the various states, stopped in Victoria, travelling to South Australia. They've been stopped by our compliance officers. What's happened? What's happened on the side of the road? So it might have been an infringement notice, unfortunately. It might be an education. It might be some formal warning. And the defects. We'll take photographs of those if it's occurred in Victoria. So that truck's been dealt with, that compliance action's been done, comes across to South Australia, stopped on the southeastern freeway by another group of safety compliance officers. We know what's happened, we can let that truck go through. Or alternatively, if it's been stopped in Victoria, there's been no action taken whatsoever, we're not going to stop it again. The technology is that good that if we've got our wave bridges open, we can start punching in the registration number of that truck and we know it's already been dealt with and flag it through. That gives productivity to industry, and we're saving approximately on average about 15 minutes per intercept. So that's the sort of technology we're talking about. The other good thing from industry's perspective is that we've had these situations where there's a dispute about a defect that's been issued by one of our safety compliance officers. That can be resolved quite quickly. It can be escalated up to some of my senior management. We have our officers wearing body-worn cameras. We can review that footage straight away, have a look at the defect ourselves and make decisions. And let's be honest, people do make mistakes. Interpretation of the law and the regulations across all states is somewhat challenging. And effectively, in due course, we utilise that technology to resolve those issues fairly quickly for industry. I have a quick talk in due course quickly also. We have a lot of data, we have a lot of intelligence. We have something called the Safety Compliance and Regulatory Platform. I won't bore you with the IT details. It's a cloud-based system. It gets all sorts of data in, registration data, operator data, all the on-road compliance data, crash data that we receive from the jurisdictions, all assisting us into effectively doing some heat mapping, picking our locations where to work, how to deploy effectively, how to actually catch that 5 to 10% of industry that even with all the education in the world, they're still not complying. And I think there's an expectation from industry that they're the ones that we need to focus on. Just moving forward, Peter, just to sum up, the exciting thing, we got some Commonwealth Heavy Vehicle Safety Initiative funding, which is we're just going through a procurement process where we're now starting to develop some mobile ANPR technology and also developing, believe it or not, some drone technology and also the deployment of mobile trailers with ANPR technology. Some of those benefits, what we'll be doing is actually we have our fixed camera sites. These mobile trailers will be deployed to those secondary routes where we don't see a lot of industry. And once again, trying to get that group of operators who are trying to avoid our wave bridge sites. And effectively drone technology, once again, catching those people, those at-risk operators on those secondary routes, trying to avoid us. And also the drone technology is so good. A recent operation, I think, down at South Australia, Western Australia, where Western Australia have this technology, they were able to focus in on drivers parked on the side of the road, actually filling out their work diaries at the last minute. So that's the level of technology we're looking at. The other thing I'd like to quickly talk about is it's called risk profiling, and I'll just talk to you quickly about that. All this data is coming to the Nhvr. So who do we look at? We look at the data. We look at a operator's compliance over a period of time. We're actually giving some sort of risk profile to that operator. I'll call it a scoring system. And we know for a fact that effectively if they've got a good score, a good risk profile, they're not going to come to the attention of the Nhvr. Once again, I spoke about not being stopped, not being disrupted during compliance activity. So there's still a lot of work in progress in that, and we're getting better at it and getting a lot more specialised at it. Once again, summing up that targeted compliance is what we want to do. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Paul. Lyndon, as a cross-border operator, how important is the consistent application of regulations?
I think that it actually comes down to there's a great deal of importance by it. I think what we've seen in the past, back when I was thinking of an example, there is back when there was a different cross-border counting rules in regards to counting hours and logbooks, we had all sorts of grief with drivers that they might be from Brisbane and they had their own counting hours rules up in Brisbane that was different to Victorian rules, but our business and our compliance was all based out of Victoria. And so just trying to teach these guys from a different state about how we were policing the counting of the hours, it was really difficult. And what we found was when there was different methods to implement a particular regulation across the states, it was just training the drivers to how to deal with those different styles. And while you might think, oh well, it's not that bad, what the drivers, if they do get it wrong and if they're going into a different state, and while we don't have anyone operating in WA, I can only see that the bigger challenges those operators might have with drivers that are travelling from WA into South Australia and Victoria and back, is that a lot of those fines for logbooks, they can easily be a couple of grand. And if you think of a fine for a couple of grand for a business, it mightn't be that much, but that's effectively the gross revenue for a driver for a week. And to put it in perspective, if that was covered across our business, that would be just a massive, massive fine. And it's easy to say, well, the drivers, these logbook things, these are critical breaches they're having. That $2,000 fine, that's equivalent to his revenue for that week is effectively zero, and his expenses have kept going out. And if you painted that across a business, that'd just be astronomical fines. And I think that's where we shouldn't just dispel the need to have those regulations policed correctly, because literally the people at the coalface, they're the ones that are going to get confused. And I think the closest analogy, probably the biggest problem we got right at the minute, and while it's not directly related to compliance, is the bloody COVID regulations and cross-border permits in regards to COVID. As I swear, there's a lot of the states, they're changing them on a daily basis. They're changing the rules. And over the last year and a half, there have been countless days where I've sent out multiple toolbox talks to drivers each day, multiple toolbox talks a day, saying, the rules have changed, time to reapply again. Sorry, the rules have changed, reapply again. And I tell you what, the poor drivers that are crossing borders at the moment, their heads are spinning in regards to the technical responsibility they have to cross the borders at the moment. Their heads are spinning. This is ridiculous, and that is, I think that's our biggest challenge right at the minute in regards to cross-border regulations. But I think that I recognise that that's not an NHVR kind of responsibility, but I'd be negligent if I didn't bring that up right now.
On that point, that we have so many regulations, it's not just the NHVR, it's the police, it can be council rangers, it can be the EPA, it can be work cover. In New South Wales, at least, tow trucks have to deal with fair trading. Is our industry over-regulated, and are authorities keeping up?
Thanks, Pete. That's a great question. And just following on from what Lyndon was just saying, I think we've missed quite a few there. There's New South Wales Health in there. We've now got bulk sites now putting in their own rules based on their interpretation of, chain of responsibility and the like. So to answer your question, Pete, yes, I think we've got an industry that is heavily over-regulated, and we have many authorities that we have to deal with. The neighbourhoods area, they've got a whole swag of different people to deal with. Same with livestock. We've got the animal welfare issues, so we need to deal with DPI departments as well. So yes, there is a whole lot of authorities that we have to deal with and a whole lot of red tape. we're basically wrapped very tightly. And I do see the benefit of regulation in that it does, make our industry better. But in saying that, we need to sort of somewhat acknowledge as well that over-regulation means industry has to pay higher compliance costs to navigate this industry. And we need to also acknowledge that we can't continue to push out regulations just for the sake of, under the guise of safety, as I'd say. I think in the last 12 months, we've seen quite a lot of regulations being pushed out to industry under the guise of safety when, we need to really think, are they safety related and are they contributing to road safety? It's an increasingly hard to run your business with all of this compliance and then having to deal with the myriad of differing rules across the states and territories. I think, to be fair as well, Pete, and the panel, I think we need to be very fair in saying that we've come a long way from where we have been. We think back 30 years ago, we had a lot of issues, and I think the NHVR must be applauded for the job that they've done to bring us into line. They still have hands tied, unfortunately, because we're not moving fast enough to get these, a single one-stop shop for the heavy vehicle national law. And I think that's really the key to moving forward, Pete, is to get the NHVR the powers they need. From there, we can then work with the other authorities to work out, how it's applied. And I think that's one of the biggest issues we face is we've got regulations, but they're all being applied differently by these different authorities. So if we could come up with a single application of these laws, some sort of guides, books, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we certainly need to move in that step. And basically, the last point I'll make is that I think, I just think that we are over-regulated, but we need regulation to remain safe. So I think the answer there is the NHVR. They need to have the powers that we set out to give them 8 years ago, and we need to get that moving quickly. I think, as Paul said at the beginning, we're moving, and, I think once New South Wales and Queensland comes on board, we may see, change and some of that unravelling of the red tape that we're wrapped in.
Thanks, Beck. Paul, given that you've your experience on both sides, on the roadside, police have got parallel powers to the NHVR under the New Vehicle National Law. What can the NHVR do to help police enforce the law in the same way as the NHVR and have a bit more consistency?
Yeah, it's a good question, Pete. Beck, thanks for the acknowledgement of the NHVR's work, but we still know in that space there's still a lot to do with regards to harmonisation. It's very challenging at this stage, and everyone's working the HVNL review in due course, and hopefully we do see some change about that harmonisation. So just getting back to the police, help's probably an unusual word, Peter. It's more about NHVR and our policing agencies. We work in collaboration. That's what it comes down to. There's a national road safety agenda that the police utilise. We have our own national heavy vehicle strategy. We also have our national compliance policy. The regulator is a great believer of effectively educating industry when it comes to compliance and enforcement activities. Don't think of that as a sign of weakness. We get a lot more, and I'll call it changing behaviour of drivers and operators by talking to them about their non-compliance and giving them some guidance and advice on how they can have a better safety system and keeping our roads safe. That's what it's all about. But don't get me wrong, when we deal with serious matters and critical matters, they'll be dealt with appropriately. And you would have seen probably back last year, we had a couple of operators got to a stage where we had to take some really quick action by issuing prohibition notice and shutting their business down for a period of time whilst they got those safety issues rectified. We're now starting to see some traction in primary duty investigations. I think there's 15 primary duty investigations at the moment that are happening. This is what industry has always said to us at the start. We've heard about the chain of responsibility laws. When are you going to take action? This was probably about 2 years ago. We're now starting to see some of those results. But can I talk about some of those matters that are going to court? They're not just getting, and there are some significant fines being issued. I don't shy away from that, and that's the magistrate's view in issuing those fines. But what I'm seeing when it's coming to outcomes is that we're starting to utilise some of those tools in the HVNL we're starting to see some enforceable undertakings. We're starting to see some supervisory intervention orders, improvement notices. These are really fantastic outcomes when we're trying to change the behaviour of an operator or trying to put more safety around it. When we work with the police, go Beck, is that a question?
Yes, Paul, I'm just coming back to the question. One of the issues that our industry is facing is the inconsistent application. So pulled over right roadside, depending on whether it's a police officer or, another authorised officer, the outcome is different depending on, who you get roadside. So I guess my question is it in the NHVR's scope to develop some sort of professional development system or program for anybody that's enforcing the HVNL? Is it time to get a system in place that can help manage that roadside enforcement and ensure it's consistent across the board?
I'll be honest with you, Beck. As with any policing agency, we generally don't have control. The Commissioner of Police controls their organisation and controls the way their officers do their enforcement on the side of the road. But just getting back to your question is that I run that southern region at the moment, and this year's piece of work for me will be if an issue arises in Victoria and arises in South Australia, the expectation of the driver or the operator is that that outcome should be the same based on the same issues that have been arisen. So I've got a little bit of work to do in that space, and I look at what my officers are doing on the side of the road, getting that harmonisation outcome. When we deal with matters with the police, what I'm liking at the moment is we'll do joint operations with the police. We'll have our roller brake testing machines there. We have police getting engaged a lot more with our on-road officers, having a greater understanding of the law, because I might be dealing with officers in South Australia, but we're stopping a New South Wales truck and there's different rules and regulations. There's not an expectation on that South Australian officer to have a whole national scope and understanding of those laws. So there is a bit of work. We obviously meet with the police quite frequently in each policing jurisdictions. We have forums with the police. We align our national operations with them and also our state-based and regional operations. Will there be a piece of work in due course? Can I tell you that at the moment, some of the NHVR prosecutes offences on behalf of the police, so there's an education process then. And obviously, we also are involved in some of the training of the officers. So slowly we're making some inroads. As you said, just to get that consistent approach of the way the enforcement is applied by the police and the NHVR. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Paul. Shannon Cole, what role can technology play in streamlining compliance requirements?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Look, we've obviously discussed a lot of issues that can be challenges for a lot of organisations. And I see technology as being, a key tool in being able to mitigate and manage, those risks in a paperless environment. One of the big challenges of any transport operation, even a fully compliant one, is the burden of checking and verifying all of that compliant paperwork. So the ability of technology and systems to be able to manage those risks proactively and manage them by exception is one of the key tasks, and that doesn't matter whether you're an owner-operator or a larger company. It's that ability to focus on the issues at hand and know that you've got good objective evidence of compliance for everything else if an alert hasn't been raised. So, the ability to be able to streamline it and manage it by exception is probably the biggest advantage, and whether that doesn't matter whether you're big or small.
Can I ask the panel, what are the long-term industry benefits from operating under a national telematics framework? Shannon, can you kick that off?
Well, look, I think certainly the national telematics framework does give us the baseline that we can build on. I think one of the biggest things as an industry we haven't yet done is tapped into what the data and the information can do for us. And certainly we have to certain extents in some bulk areas with schemes like IAP, TMA, the RIM scheme. So, and I'm sure Beck can talk to some of the advantages in the livestock and bulk and primary produce areas. But certainly that ability to use the data to either increase productivity, gain more access, and ultimately get the infrastructure built where and when the trucks need it, where they're actually travelling. So, a lot of benefits for the more data we can feed into those national schemes.
Lyndon, you got a comment on that?
I think that in a utopian sense, it would be wonderful to move to this system where things like IAP and PBS access do give us the productivity gains that have often been spoken about. And coming from a perspective of a business that we do try and exploit those mechanisms to an extent. Pretty much most of our fleet's registered for IAP. We don't get to use that every day. It's quite expensive, and there isn't an ability to opt in and opt out. So we're paying effectively the fee for that IAP all through the whole year. And then so it starts to get to the point of, well, do we fully realise those gains that are kind of like sold to the industry? And then on top of that, from another perspective, the system is limited by the effectively the road, whether it's I think it's the road owners, that whether it's a bridge here or there, that one day the bridge is allowed to take the capacity, and then the next day it's not allowed to take the capacity, or someone gets the rights to take this particular high productivity vehicle across a certain bridge, and then another person can't. And I'd be, and so even to use the best example that most people know of is the northbound Gundagai Bridge on the Hume, where there's currently some road trains running up there. They're dealing with the coronavirus challenge. I believe there's a couple of operators that have got the rights to run over the bridge. So when those operators run across the bridge, or the operators, because of that other bridge that got washed away, when they're running across that North Gundagai Bridge, it's not a problem. But if anyone else run across the North Gundagai Bridge in a truck that's over 30 metres, suddenly there is a problem. And that kind of not only is this regulation different by state, but this is actually regulation that's policed differently by the same road manager or the same operator of that area, based on who's the person that's actually driving the truck. And I think so these systems where it's IAPs and PBS systems that are using telematics and stuff, they are all still constrained by whether it's politics or individual preference in the background, just making some decisions about access that's irrespective of technologies. And I think that needs to be addressed, as well as addressing the technical aspect. It's all wonderful to put this awesome system in place and to press the go button on it. But if the people in the background that still need to give permissions, if they're not willing to actually go with the full potential of it and be selective and discriminate against different individuals, well, the system's never going to present the gains that it sells.
Yeah, cool.
Now I'll get my soapbox now.
Shannon, electronic work diaries and various other in-cab technology. Putting it down to the driver, the actual person behind the wheel. I won't say the bloke, because it can be a lady as well. Yeah. But the person behind the wheel, does that technology, is that a benefit to them?
Yeah, look, mate, that's really what I'm passionate about with any of these systems or solutions. If it's not going to provide benefit to the person behind the steering wheel, then none of it works or flows on and provides you benefits in your business. It's got to be a tool that assists and helps the driver. From an EWD point of view, we've talked about how complex the rules are, and how that can be a challenge for people. Going to an EWD system, the tool's doing the checking for you. It's keeping you up to date. It's managing your multiple 14-day periods. It's keeping track of all that information for you, providing you with proactive alerts prior to going into breach. So, for those, certainly a benefit there, but the other information, we've talked about the changing information at borders. Potentially, our customers have updated COVID safety rules, so there's new site entry requirements at our customer sites. All of this stuff can be transmitted to and stored on an in-cab device for a driver, so he has all of that information readily available. And even the updating or management of checklists, rather than having to reprint a pile of checklist books you've got in the corner, you can electronically change that checklist to include those. So you can pivot your checklists and your tools depending on the risk profile or a new customer that comes on board. So that ability to provide all that information in the cab to the driver, along with any geofence alerts, reminders of upcoming heavy vehicle checking stations, or whatever the case may be. It might be where the best rest stop is. It doesn't always have to be compliance related. It's just a tool to provide the driver with all of the information he needs to do his job safely. So there's certainly a lot of benefits that an in-cab device like this, along with the ability of not having to hand in and consolidate and hand in paperwork. Basically you've submitted all of your stuff the day as soon as you've hit the button. So in cab, I think from a driver point of view, certainly a lot of benefits in streamlining their day-to-day workflow and enabling the back office to be able to manage by exception.
Pardon me, a question from Ian Pendred, which I'll direct to Beck. What advantages or disadvantages do you see for your members on the first thoughts of going from paper to EWDs?
Thanks, Ian Pendred. A great question. Look, it's a very valid one at the moment. I think members can see, and operators in general can see, great potential for the electronic work diary, but right now many of them are sitting on the fence. I think Shannon articulated the advantages quite well, and I think they apply at the moment. So I might just talk more about the disadvantages and some of the things that industry will need greater clarity on before I think they'll get off that fence. So I guess the first point is, how is the Nhvr going to use the data that they're receiving from the electronic work diaries? And I don't think that's readily available at the moment, or very clear, or very well understood. Now, this lack of information makes that very difficult for industry to make any informed decision about the take-up of this technology. So that's the first issue. I guess the second one is, what is the compliance strategy or approach by the enforcement officers for electronic work diaries? How is that going to work, and is that going to be different to the written work diary? And if so, what are those changes? Excuse me. I think the other thing, and I think this is the very valid reason, is what's the incentive for industry to take up an electronic work diary? It seems that we've got the same old rules with a sharp instrument now, which is the electronic work diary, but the same rules still apply in the same way for that blunt instrument, which we refer to as the paper record. So my question is, can operators be given greater flexibility in return for greater precision? They're switching across to an electronic diary. It's obviously saving a lot of time. It's giving a great deal of benefits back to the people that are enforcing those rules. So what can industry have back in return? And I think that's a very valid point. I guess the other interesting thing is, some operators do have their electronic work diaries ready to go, ready to roll out in their fleets. However, those operators that are progressive, they don't want to be the first ones, right? So a lot of them are sort of sitting on it, waiting for industry to do this together. They don't want to go out there and be that first test dummy. So, look, I think there's still a great deal of hesitancy out there to take up the technology. I think it's got some great benefits, but unfortunately we still have a few unanswered questions that would give industry the confidence to be able to, rapidly take that up.
Just on that point, sorry, Beck, just around the visibility of the NHVR has, an IVR at the side of the road does not know that you have an EWD until you hand one out to him. So it's just an electronic record of your records. They do not have access to it. They must get them through the same notice to produce to the record keeper, or at the side of the road handing out the book. So there is no visibility of the regulator of any records in an EWD until you are issued with a notice to produce, as is the current case, or you're asked to produce it at the side of the road. And that's the first time that anyone would know as an operator that you were using an EWD. And in terms of flexibility, I think there's, again, Ian, I think had sent through a question prior to the sessions. Another, I expected some good ones from you, Ian, about how work will be counted. And I think that's where some of the flexibility, sorry if I'm jumping ahead, Peter, can help it. So work and rest is still rounded the same way, but to the minute, not in the 15-minute blocks. So, you know, traditionally in a logbook, you pull up at 10:05. We've got to wait till 10:30 to record my 15-minute rest in the logbook, especially if you're at the bottom of the Hawkesbury there and you're about to go through Mount White. You're going to have to wait until your 25 minutes to record your 15-minute rest break. That is different in an EWD. 10:05 till 20 past is 15 minutes. So there's no, your 15 minutes is 15 minutes in an EWD. You will be reminded prior to going into breach. But importantly, one of the important facts is anything above 15 minutes will accumulate. So if I've had 3 20-minute rest breaks during the day due to whatever reason, that will accumulate. There's my 1 hour's rest for the day. So
that's been accepted by the NHVR, as that's how the work can work.
That's how the tools are built. That's how the tools are built.
Yeah, I'll let Shannon finish his answer, then I'll respond on a couple of things that Beck raised as well, Peter.
I just to butt in, Shannon, is that if you can address this, is I think that they've done a pretty poor job of advertising that to the wider community, because I didn't know that. And I dare say there'll be other operators out there that, while they'll be smarter than me, they might not be aware of that either. And those kind of things, I think I could sell that to some drivers for them to, get more of an uptake.
100%, mate. It's one of the things I really highlight to the operators. These are the advantages for you in cab. No more sitting around on the side of the road. If you do have those 320s, that is going to be your 1 hour's rest for the day. No having to pull up for a fourth 15-minute rest break. So as a driver, yes, we've got to do it right. We've got to be compliant. Back in my days as a driver, a bad day, a bit of load time became rest time. We all know the nature of the beast. But what an EWD also allows us to do is demonstrate where those issues are in our supply chain, so we can look at improving that stuff. If we're continually hiding those minor little indiscrepancies, then we're never making the improvement to that loading process or whatever the case may be, or in fact engaging that consigner or receiver. And it's been the challenge for 20 years. We never do complete the COR piece unless we engage all the entire supply chain, and having the data really helps us do that and highlight where those bottlenecks are. So two of the key points: it is minute by minute, so your 15 minutes is 15 minutes, and that anything over that 15 minutes does accumulate. So two key points around benefits for the driver using an EWD.
Paul, got a comment?
So I think Beck raised the issue before about the angst about having an EWD or written work diary. My expectation from the NHVR, if we're talking about a breach, that whether using electronic work diary or a written work diary, that compliance outcome would be the same. So once again, I mentioned before about administrative errors. They're an education process for us, and we work on that basis. Don't get me wrong, critical fatigue breaches of a serious nature, they'll be dealt with, and need to ground the driver, will ground the driver. But effectively, I would not expect a different compliance outcome based on the top, whether using an EWD or written work diary. That would not change from our perspective. In fact, the EWDs give us a greater efficiency in getting that data very quickly on the side of the road than our officers taking that work diary, speaking with the driver, trying to calculate work rest time, holding up the driver once again. We're seeing greater efficiencies on the EWD, bringing up the compliance screen, being compliant, off you go. Thank you very much. I'll get some clarification about what you wrote, Shannon. I think you are correct in your interpretation about that. And I think, Lyndon, you challenged him on that point. I'll definitely get some clarification on that and come back to the group later on this afternoon, so the group's well aware and our people online have clarity around that.
Yep.
Pete, if I could just close just with a statement there. I know that we've recently just put out that, I think it's called the National Freight Data Hub. And I guess the last point I wanted to make about electronic work diaries and the telematics framework in general is that data is so powerful, and there's a big difference between data and information. So you capture data, but then you take your information and you gather it, right? So I think if we're really going to get serious about safety, I think electronic work diaries shouldn't just be used as a compliance tool, but as a safety intelligence tool. So we have access to the rest area utilisation data from that National Freight Hub. Why aren't we getting smart and analysing that freight movement data from all of these telematics systems, combining it with this rest area utilisation data, as well as applying fatigue crash data, and start identifying where we should be prioritising rest areas in the future? So I think I'm a big supporter in collecting data because it is so powerful, but as long as it's used correctly, and I think that's a perfect opportunity to gather data and use it for the better outcomes of industry. So I just wanted to add that point. Thanks.
Well, while you're adding points, Beck, and not necessarily related to EWDs, but certainly including them, can all of this technology that people like Shannon are very much up to speed on, can all this technology deliver better access and higher productivity for heavy vehicles, particularly in rural areas where your members operate?
Oh, 100%, Pete. And I think we've achieved that already through the New South Wales Farmgate Access Project. Now, we all know that local access has been a real big issue in the past. We've had road managers that are hesitant to give up their road access, and the basis behind that was assurance. They had no assurance that the person they gave a permit to was going to use that vehicle on their road in the right way. What we have created with the Farmgate Access Project is we've created a access area-wide network access by notice rather than permit process. And it's all underpinned by telematics. So all the operator needs to do, excuse me, is have room. So that's the lowest level assurance telematics, road infrastructure management tool. As long as they've got that, they can have access to a whole local government area, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, with conditions or without conditions. So what this does, it actually removes them to pay $76 for a permit, wait, up to 28 days for a response. It means you have instant access. It's as of right, and it's all done under notice. And the beauty about this is that councils never had any oversight or understanding of their road network. What this now does, it de-identifies all of that movement data, it aggregates it. So what that means is it piles it in with a whole bunch of other people's data, and the councils now get a complete listing of all the vehicles using their road networks. Now, how powerful is that for local councils to be able to get road upgrades so that we don't have to do these processes? That we can slowly build data, understand our networks, and then make informed decisions based on them. So to answer your question, Pete, absolutely, I think telematics can, and I think it's been proven through the New South Wales Farmgate Access Project.
Can you add to that, Shannon?
Yeah, well, look, I think Beck's summed it up beautifully. Look, it really is about that assurance piece. I think as an industry, it's we need to learn how to use the data and what we're collecting for our benefit. And I think there's a lot of gains that can be made through access schemes like that, having the right infrastructure at the right bridge spent, Lyndon, where we need it based on the real data where the vehicles are moving. I think the more we embrace it as an industry, the more arguments we can make, whether that's with government, with road area managers, or even with our customers, our consigners and receivers, when in terms of their impact on our supply chains. Better data, better decisions. Spot on, Beck. So yeah.
Okay, changing direction a little bit now. According to the recent NTARC report on major accidents, more than half were due to driver error, including things such as driver distraction and inappropriate speed. Do we need better standards and training for licensing? Lyndon.
It would be great to have. It would be great to have the typical person, whether it's like while the context of the questions about drivers, I know there's a lot of workshops that are actually looking at this as well, and I think the thing that we get is when we get a diesel mechanic coming onto the site, we're typically either seeing them at the beginning of an apprenticeship or they've already completed that apprenticeship. And so for the diesel mechanics we're seeing on site, there's a lot more than just them getting a ticket. Like they go through a big apprenticeship program. And I know a lot of people have spoken in the past about, do drivers need to go through an apprenticeship program instead as well? And I tip my hat to people like, say, the fuel industry and such, because I know a few of the companies in there and their training program for the drivers and like that apprenticeship program they've got for drivers coming into that fuel industry, like it is really good. Like I've got to give them credit. They do a really good job. And I think there's always room for people like ourselves to do a better job when we're bringing onboarding new drivers into the business, whether it's through further on training, mentorships, and just expanding those kind of programs that we've got. But it'd be lovely that someone else did it for us before they got here. But I can see it's already difficult for drivers to get into the industry already. They've got to wait some time frame before they can get in. There's hurdle programs where you've got to get one type of license first and pay that money, thousands of dollars. Then you've got to pay money for another type of license. So there's already those hurdle step programs. And then to put on top of that, if there was a requirement for them to be a heavy vehicle driver, that they also have to undertake some kind of Certificate 3 in transport, I feel that it would probably further restrict the supply of drivers into the industry rather than improving the supply. And I think so that's where, from an operator, I know that I'm going to have to take it on board where we're probably going to have to do that extra training ourselves. But any advice that people have or any kind of support that people could offer, we would take it on board. So, but it's difficult. It's difficult.
Beck, the rate of young people joining the heavy vehicle industry continues to decline rapidly, particularly in rural and regional areas. Can technology help attract them? You know, we're not talking about kids that are on their PlayStations or anything, but they've grown up with that.
Look, it's a very good question. Yes, I think it's, and I'll just go back to what you just said, Lyndon. I think we've got different angles to come in with training into our industry. We've got experienced drivers that have come, and want to upgrade their license. So we need certain things to do that. But with young people, I think we've got a really good opportunity to tap into technology to get them interested in the heavy vehicle industry. And the reason I say that, we all, with our kids, my 8-year-old has an iPhone, for example, and can use it better than me. So I think with us as an industry moving towards technology in our vehicles, in our setup. So we're talking ABS, we're talking in-cab, telematics systems. We've got a whole range of things that can support the safer industry. And also, I guess the other factor is that parents have a real issue with getting their young kids into a truck, because we've got such a poor image. So I think that if the community knows that we're training drivers, we're putting them into safe vehicles, I really do think that we can attract younger people to the industry. Now, our president, Paul Pulver, he's a long-term industry rep, and he's got a lot to say. He's retired now, but he wants to give back to the industry. And what he's come up with, which I'm fully supportive of, and so is our association, is a cadetship concept. So really, we don't really want kids going to TAFE and doing this and that. We want kids in trucks, learning with a reputable business, a reputable company that has good trucks, good staff, and good training in place. So the idea behind that is that a young kid on his P plates can come in and start driving heavy vehicles within a radius, a certain radius of the depot. It means by the time he turns 21 or, the time he's ready to get out on the road, he's fully licensed, he's fully trained, he's got all the background information from mentors, right? Not just people that are with their TAE that can do training. He's got industry, or they've got industry experience, should I say. And the thing is, they can then go out and earn a decent income at 21. So we're not losing these people to other industries because they're not earning any money, or they're just simply washing the trucks and not driving the trucks. So, look, I'm a big supporter of internal cadetships for our industry and the mentor program to get young people in. And I do think that as part of that, we need to encourage young people into technology. Comes back to the EWD. If you've never done a written work diary and you've gone straight into an electronic work diary, that's going to make sense to you, right? And then you'll start rolling it out. So I think that's where we need to tap into technology and try to entice young people into our industry. It is technical, it is pretty full on, and the rigs you're driving, they're worth a lot of money. So let's try and give it back and increase the image, and I think that would work.
I like the idea, Beck. You were saying about the cadetship. It'd be wonderful if, like, you got P plates for cars, and it'd be wonderful if they did actually have a P plate license for trucks, and maybe the only restriction was they can't get a logbook, and so that automatically restricts them to the geographical location of the yard of which they nominate as their yard, and so they don't have to, like, they're less inclined to deal with those kind of massive fatigue challenges about long kilometres, that big interstate task, but still whether they're blooding into the industry as local drivers and such, and that might be something that could get looked at. Whether it can happen, who knows? But I like your idea.
Yeah, and I love that too. That's great. Thanks, Lyndon. That's a perfect idea.
Can I just make a comment, Peter?
Absolutely.
So I really like, Beck, that initiative there. I think it's fantastic. I think the general concept we all agree here is about that, developing that practical skills training rather than those traditional in-class TAFE courses. That mentorship cadetship sort of stuff is fantastic. I think when you're attracting the young people, I think they're a little bit more tech savvy, having spoken to some of the drivers on the side of the road. And I think a recent technology survey, we've got heavy vehicles, 78% have got stability control, 59% with lane departure warning, 18% with fatigue detection. So we're moving in the right direction. And like you said, there's still that stigma, the mum and dads, about their kids getting into the industry. It's perceived by the media quite wrongly in some circumstances. And the sense, like when you talk about trucks, they're perceived as, these big diesel-laden things that are unsafe and etc. Some perception. But we see some of the fantastic technology coming out, some of the vehicles that are being produced. I'd want to drive one of those if I weren't working for the Nhvr. I mean, that's the attraction there. And I think you're heading in the right direction in industry and promoting that. Keep it up.
Good. Thanks for that, Paul. It's interesting. We're nearly out of time. It's nearly time to wrap up, but just noticing a couple of the questions coming through from people watching live, and our good friend Russell Greenland has actually taken upon himself to respond to some EWD. Thanks, Russell. Okay, in wrapping up, has anyone got any comments that they'd like to finish up with? Lyndon. Just I saw your mic was off, mate. That's why I picked you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I think that one of the main takeaways that I think that carries a lot of, and it's great to hear from Paul's perspective from the NHVR, and hearing about, I think that the successes that the NHVR have had in South Australia and Tas and Victoria, and taking on those sites. And we as an operator do want to see that that consistent regulation across the eastern seaboard. And I know there's different challenges for the guys out west, but I see that as something that will benefit our business, that consistency across the state, and just wanting to be able to try and to offer that support to try and make it happen, which will be good. But then and so that's probably the main takeaway, and I enjoy that part of it. So I appreciate it.
Paul.
As I said, I think I agree with Lyndon. Having these various laws across different states makes it hard for us to do compliance. So we work really hard with our state-based agencies, and we're working hard to try to harmonise. But one of the big focal points from us is actually listening to industry. If we don't listen to industry, we don't know it all. We can't work in isolation. We may think of something that's got a great outcome or a great initiative, but without consulting industry, we're heading in a really poor direction. So we rely on that value. As I said, we're still working on that whole education function from the Nhvr. We work hard at that, and we pride ourselves on that because that is a big plus for us. But as I said, we can't ignore the fact that 5 to 10% still give us a lot of grief, and we'll work hard to try to target that group. But as I said, it's really great here today to see really good initiatives. I think that Beck really excited about the attraction of younger drivers to industry. We're always concerned about their level of competency in driving some of these vehicles. We've had some accidents attributed in South Australia just due to not being able to engage a certain part of the freeway. So anything that can help, that practical skills training will be fully supported by the NHVR. But thank you for inviting us today, and also the ATA as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Beck, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Excuse me. Look, I think today's been great. I'd just like to say that industry is trying its best. We all know that. We're all trying to keep up. And I think Nhvr, TCA and industry suppliers are doing a great job with consulting us. So I think in the last 12 months, the LBRCA in particular, with our close relationship with Transport for New South Wales, has achieved great things. And I think as an industry, we need to embrace collaboration with agencies to ensure that we get the right results. So the final other takeaway, don't be scared of telematics or technology. If it's used in the right way, it can be so powerful. And I think as an industry, we need to start embracing it. So thank you for the opportunity today. Thank you to the ATA in particular, and thanks for Pete Shields for facilitating this session. Great job.
Thanks, Beck. Shannon, as our technology guru.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think Beck just stole my thunder. No, look, really, that message. Don't be scared of the technology. Do yourself a favour. Go out and see what it can do for your business. It's yes, they are tools to help manage and do that compliance, but it's the streamlining of that burden that allows you to focus on other parts and growing your business, and it can certainly enable you to prove to all and sundry, whether it be a regulator, customer, or anything, that you are doing the right thing. So it's really a tool to help you improve your business.
Just on EWDs, I mean, versus paper logbooks, I noticed that there's a few of the questions that were coming through that there is a little bit of still confusion out there about them regarding accuracy and sending messages back to the operational office. And our paper work diaries, 35 or 38 pages of instructions. Have we got to expect a little bit of pain whilst we roll out the EWD thing, or are they simpler?
Look, I think, most drivers, our experience with rollout, yes, there is a change management piece, probably bigger for those that have used our previous Sentinel product because it's new. If you're a new user, it's all new to you, so not as difficult. But I think so there is a change management piece. It's about getting people comfortable with the tool. But certainly, as Paul mentioned, the roadside intercepts are a lot simpler now because we can just go straight to the investigation aid, nothing on there. Happy days, mate. See you later. It does provide a smoother roadside intercept. It does proactively alert both yourself and your ops managers of upcoming breaches, so any additional guidance can be provided to the driver. So It's a pretty simple process once you've got it up and running. We've certainly taken the time to put together an authorised officer's guide as well and tried to distribute that to everyone. But a lot of the feedback I've had has been really positive in terms of the roadside intercept, and always remembering that even if you make a mistake in an EWD, you've got the data to prove what your intent was and what you'll be able to show where you were and when you did, even if you've made an incorrect entry. It's the fair dinkum department. You've got all the information to prove what you did and when you did it. Ultimately there can be some nervousness from drivers, but like I said, if you do that change management piece right at the start, we've had fairly positive feedback from all users so far.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Thanks, everyone, for participating. Thanks also, everyone out there joining us live online for your questions and your comments. Time has beat us, so we won't be able to address all of them, but I think there'll be some ongoing dialogue, which is rather excellent. And again, thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So you're all good to see you, and thank you very much. Take it easy.
Well done.
Thanks.
See you guys. Thank you.
Well, bye-bye.
Beck, I'll have a discussion to you about concessional registrations when I get a chance.
I look forward to it. Paul, call me anytime.
Thanks, Beck. Thanks, Shannon.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.